So the trade season is upon us, and the Raptors are likely going to be selling off a few pieces of theirs, even if the record picks up from the under 500 mire they currently find themselves in. I should mention that I'm recording this on Thursday after the loss to the Grizzlies and Justin Champagnie getting waived after said game, so it's entirely possible that a trade has already happened with one of our players between then and when you're seeing this video. Admittedly, I don't expect there to be fireworks like some fans or executives suggest, or, and let's be blatant about it, what said executives want. The Masai/Bobby front office has, historically, tinkered with their roster, but has refused to blow things up despite the numerous times where they could have done so after the team has gone through a rough patch, and I can't imagine anything that has happened recently to really change that outlook. Like if they somehow get into the lottery and wind up with like Amin Thompson or Scoot Henderson, great, but I'm not expecting them to blow it all up just because of this one bad season and like draft Gigi Jackson or Anthony Black and move forward with him and Scottie as their dynamic duo. Sure, the team is struggling right now. They're quite literally out of the play-in and looking at the 8th best odds in the lottery. And their upcoming schedule is far from ideal, but the absolute worst case scenario I could see is them punting the season and aggressively retooling the roster over the summer, likely with the high draft pick that they can either use or shop around like the 22 Blazers tried to do. And say what you will about the Blazers, this season they're in a much better state than they were the season prior, in large part due to that aggressive retooling, which involved using several of the assets that they got from trading away several of their players like CJ McCollum and Norman Powell. Granted, I think they could have gotten more than they did for Norman Powell, but I digress. With that in mind, I thought it'd be a good idea to go over the team's players and specifically break down who is likely to be available and who is sticking around no matter what. We're not necessarily going into what this or that player's trade value is or who this player can net us back, just whether or not they might be traded. But before that, let's go over the trio of players that, regardless of the team's direction, are unlikely to share Norman Powell's house selling woes.
I still have my house. If anybody want to buy it, it's up for sale. But I love Portland, man. It was a good time being back.
Yeah, we'll explain why there's an asterisk next to that, but first, the trio of players: Scottie Barnes, Pascal Siakam, and OG Anunoby. Scottie Barnes should go without saying. He is only 21 years old and the sky is the limit for him. You don't trade him no matter what direction the team is going in. If you're going to rebuild, then duh, he's the future. If you're going to contend, you're still going to bank on him breaking out, at least as your second option, maybe third. While OG Anunoby isn't quite as youthful, he's young enough to stick around for a rebuild, retool, or whatever direction the team goes in. He's an incredible defender who's able to put up around 20 points a night, and even though his shot hasn't been great this season, historically he's been one of the team's better 3-point shooters, so you don't move OG Anunoby either. Now, Pascal, some might argue about trading him for a haul to kickstart an extensive rebuild, given his age and the age of Scottie and OG and the timelines and how the Supermax he might be eligible for will constrict the team in terms of its financial flexibility, but that is both short-sighted and misguided. For one, Siakam got into the NBA much later than most players, so it's not like he's in season 11 with a ton more NBA wear and tear to his name. Like, he quite literally has one season less played than Devin Booker. He's played 6 seasons and is going on his 7th, and he is playing at an all-NBA level as of right now. But let's say you do decide to trade Pascal Siakam. Even if you do get a decent haul of picks and players for Pascal, let's say you get 3 firsts, Shadion Sharp, and Anthony Simons from the Blazers, we'll ignore whether or not that deal is actually viable. There is no guarantee that anyone in said rebuild, whether it be one of the players that you get back or the players that you draft with their picks, will match or surpass Pascal Siakam. He is a top 15 player in the league right now, a two-way wing with the handling and passing abilities that makes him a better point guard than most teams' starting point. Hell, he's better than our starting point guard, who is technically a shooting guard that's playing out of... We'll get into Fred later. That's a player you build around. You don't just give them away in the hopes of re-rolling for a player with a higher ceiling in the draft. In fact, a rebuild would constitute a substantial amount of uncertainty. There is no guarantee that a rebuild pays off whatsoever, and you could be stuck in a perpetual rebuild for years, if not a decade. Just look at the Pistons or Magic. Both of these teams have been near the bottom of the standings for a long time. Their peaks of the past decade have been, what, a first-round exit? And not like a dignified exit, we're talking about a sweep as the 7th or 8th seed. Granted, both teams seem to have turned things around as of late, and you could argue about how much of their ineptitude over the past decade had to do with poor management or player development, but I digress. Like I said though, there is a reason why there's an asterisk next to the title of the section, and that's because you can never know what sort of can't say no swindle of an offer might come across one's desk for a given player. Like, if the front office of the New Orleans Pelicans felt like they wanted to do their best impressions of the Wolves front office and get fleeced by offering Ingram, Dyson Daniels, and 5 unprotected firsts for Pascal, you'd take that deal every time, regardless of personal sentiment, because that is an absurd overpay. To be clear, I'm not saying that New Orleans would do that, and I'm not saying that that's what Pascal is worth. I'm saying that such an offer is too stupid to pass up in terms of what it gives you, and what the front office can do with all of that to rebuild or retool around what they get back, compared to what you're giving up. The only player this doesn't really apply to is Scottie Barnes, because I don't think any front office would be so brazen as to even make a serious call about him, at least at this stage. What with the executives expecting the front office to pivot into a rebuild around him, like why would you trade away Scottie Barnes if you're trying to rebuild? But again, I don't expect some major breakup of that trio to happen, and I assume that all three will remain on the roster come the deadline. Unlike the next player.
Baby, come back. You can blame it all on me.
So it's not a secret that Trent Jr. is the likeliest to go, right? Fans believe it, rival executives believe it, that contract he signed when he was a restricted free agent screamed trade piece. The only real surprise was that he wasn't traded away last season when he at least had another full year under his contract. The man is coming off the bench so Nick Nurse can start a bloody movie star that sides as a basketball player, and before that, a second-round rookie who, talented as they may be on defense, is constantly in foul trouble and is a zero on offense if he's not being fed lobs. We can debate about Trent's ideal role on a given team all we want and how he's actually been fantastic off the bench compared to how sluggish he was when he started this season, but at the end of the day, that is a demotion when you've been a starter for a full season, and with Trent essentially expiring because, yeah, he has another year, but it's a player option and he's not going to take that, and a seemingly fractured relationship if rumors are anything to go by, moving him is the only real option on the table. Honestly, the way the team has handled things with Gary Trent Jr. has been very poor from a management perspective. We'll get into the specifics about that mismanagement and the details of a Trent trade in a different video, but for now, the teams interested in him include the Suns, the Warriors, the Heat, the Hawks, the Bulls, and the Wizards, and there's likely other suitors that have been making calls that we don't know about. Really, the only uncertainty is whether the Raptors use Trent as a means of consolidation and pack him with a few picks and salary to upgrade their guards, or if they take a step back this season and leap forward as a deeper team in a year or two, depending on the pieces that they receive. The one thing that does seem certain about a Trent trade though, the Raptors, if they are going to take a step back, are going to aim for a first as minimum draft compensation in said package, but beyond that, it really depends on the team that he goes to. Again, we'll talk about it in that video dedicated to Trent and his possible trade destinations. As far as trading away the depth pieces go, there's not much to really say beyond if there's a good deal out there for any one of the many forwards and bigs that occupy the Raptors bench, they'll take it. Admittedly, I don't know how valuable a 34-year-old Thad Young might be to a contender in need of more veteran depth, and I doubt people are making calls for Kem Birch, but you never know what sort of trade ideas people are floating around, or if a team just needs some salary filler to make a deal work. I know there were a few teams who floated around trades for Chris Boucher the past 2 seasons. Maybe some of those teams revisit those moves? If nothing else, we could stand apart ways with one of our many fours. We're kind of lacking in, center and guard depth, as opposed to forward depth. The only bench players where there's a debate as to whether the Raptors are actively listening to offers right now are Otto Porter Jr., Malachi Flynn, and Precious Achiuwa. Starting with Precious, Achiuwa has been out for weeks, and it might still be a little while longer before he comes back, but even so, he was the big piece back from the Lowry trade, and you'd imagine the front office isn't going to sell him after him playing only a little over a season. Plus, with him not playing well for what limited time he's been on the court this season, I can't imagine there are any compelling offers for Precious right now that are worth taking. As for Porter, he's just not going to be moved. It's that simple. Unless he asks for a trade, he's staying in Toronto. He wanted to sign with the Raptors this offseason, and it'd be a really bad look to trade away arguably your biggest free agent signing since Turkoglu, I think. Especially when Toronto is a shockingly poor team when it comes to attracting free agents in the NBA. Seriously, it's freaking Toronto. Why does nobody want to come here? The winter weather is the same here as it is in Chicago and New York, and there's plenty to... Sorry, went off on a rant. Short version, if he's getting moved, it's because he asked for a trade and the front office wants to do right by him. Lastly, we have Malachi Flynn. Now, if you were to ask me whether Malachi would be traded at or before the deadline a week or two ago, the answer would have been yes under those same good deal yay, bad deal nay guidelines, but now, it's hard to say. With him getting more minutes of late and looking way better than he has earlier in this season or even the prior season, you can read that in three ways. Either one, he's earned those minutes with how he's been playing in practice, again he's been way better as of late. Two, the increased minutes are to pump up his trade value and ship him out for more than he would otherwise go for. Or three, this could be a prelude to him playing a larger role in the guard rotation, as either Trent is shipped out and thus you need Flynn to make up for the lost 3-point shooting, Malachi has been scorching from outside of late, or the major question for the team and its direction and whether or not said player is going to be available at the deadline is answered loud and clear. I'm not going to pretend that Fred has been a bum this entire season like a lot of Raptor fans, but he has not been great, and him betting on himself by not taking that extension he was offered in the offseason might be a blessing in disguise for the team. Yes, he's had his fair share of good games even this year, but he's looked a step slower on defense, and on the court he's fallen back in old routines of hero balling out after starting off the season playing more off ball. And despite some games where he's put up some flashy stats, his 3-point shooting has been shockingly awful. Hell, one of the games where he went off for 39 points, which by the by was a loss, he shot a dreadful 2 for 8 from 3. People are quick to bring up how pivotal VanVleet was in the finals and the Eastern Conference Finals with the Bucks, but those were years ago, and he's not the same player he once was. Plus, if we're going by what he did during the finals run, you also have to bring up how he was pretty terrible when he faced the 76ers in the semifinals, and how he was a large reason why that series went to 7 games. It was a lot more of a slugfest than you remember. Fred's technically in a contract year, but there is a chance he picks up his player options if he continues to play as awkwardly as he has throughout the season. That said, it's a chance which I doubt the front office is going to wait around for. Maybe they talk to him or Pascal about the team's direction. Maybe they surprise him by telling him he's a wizard in a week, but either way, the man once poised to sign the largest extension for an undrafted player might have made the wrong bet on himself. Of course, this is ignoring the intangible that Fred brings, regardless of how much one values those aspects. He's a great culture man, a veteran presence on a team that's relatively young, and while his friendship with Pascal isn't the second coming of Lowry and DeMar's all-time bromance, they do appear to be close enough that Pascal is referred to as family, so who knows if trading away Fred will anger their star player or how he'll handle the news if it's a surprise to him. That aside, and what I'm about to say is largely speculatory, don't take it as a fact or anything, given my suspicion that the team's current underperformance, with the talent level that they have right now, is tied due to locker room problems, trading away one of your veteran presences and one of your star players' friends can severely mess with the team's likely already fragile chemistry. Team chemistry is a larger contributor to a team failing to go all the way than people give it credit for. It's incredibly easy to destroy it, and it is very, very hard to put the pieces back together again. Still, you do have to wonder what offers are being made at the moment for Fred, even if you would be selling him low, and whether Fred himself is the source of some friction in the locker room. After all, he is one of the 2 players on the roster right now that are trying to play for the next contract. But like I said, this is all pure speculation, and I could be reading into things where there's neither smoke nor fire. But with how he's played as of late and the monster of a contract that Fred was once looking to sign, his position in the team, or even being on the team, no longer looks like a sure bet. And that's the short of it. Expect a video on Trent soon, and maybe one on VanVleet. Until next time, game on, my friends.